I want to start with a specific entry from my dream journal. November 30th, 2025. I'm on day 4 of a 12-day fast. And this is the dream. I'm in a medieval village with my family and we're looking for a path out of it into the surrounding mountains. We're asking the residents and one of them shows us the way. It's difficult for him to explain, so we climb to a tower to get a better view. But the location where he expected the path to be, there's nothing to see. But in the other direction, there's a dry river valley. So we start heading towards it because this seems to be the way out. And then suddenly, at some point, I end up in a rickshaw moving fast. But it's going in the wrong direction. And I tell the driver to stop, but he doesn't. He says I have to wait till the next stop. So I decide to jump off the moving rickshaw and walk back. Later, in the same dream, in the same night, and now we're already in the river valley, someone asks about kite surfing. Then we climb up to a mountain lake. And one by one people start surfing in this lake. But the first part of the lake is flat, and a little bit further away it goes into a steep slope. So most surfers try to return before they reach the slope. When I unpack my equipment, I have a kite, but I don't find my board. I ask an old friend if I can use his. First he hesitates and then he gives it to me. I documented that dream and sat with it for a long time, because it has a lot of details actually. And I think it's a great example to show you in this video. Because usually when I see videos or read books about dream interpretation, a lot of the dreams seem slightly constructed. But this one doesn't. It just sounds strange, and I think this is great because it gives us a good perspective on how to do dream interpretation. Most dreams are like that. I mean, they can be very different, but they will be very individual and symbolic. And this dream contains, in a single night's imagery, everything I want to talk about today. I'm doing now dream journaling since 8 years. Sometimes more frequent, sometimes less. And I have over 200 documented dreams. I started it because I was interested in my dreams and felt they're telling something important. Now, if you start dream interpretation, there are many ways to interpret them and different philosophies how to do it. And I tried different methods before I ended up with dream interpretation according to Carl Gustav Jung. Jung was insistent that the unconscious communicates. And he didn't mean it metaphorically, but with a kind of precision the waking mind tends to dismiss. I'm working also as a mentor with clients and guide them especially through midlife transformations. And my conversations changed a lot over the last month and years. People are using more and more artificial intelligence for their careers and all other conscious aspects of their lives. They use it seriously and thoughtfully. And those AI tools are doing exactly what they decide to do. They're optimizing the professional identity you already have. On the other hand, your unconscious has been producing a completely different kind of intelligence. And this is about the career you suppressed, the direction you haven't taken, and the version of your professional life that never got built. And there's no AI system in the world that can access that field. Not because the technology isn't sophisticated enough, but because it's operating on a completely different plane. And that's what I want to get into today. Why your dreams know more about your life and your career than ChatGPT. And what Jung's framework actually gives you for reading and understanding them. First of all, let me be precise about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying AI tools are useless. And I'm not saying they're all bad. I use them several hours a day and they make my life easier. They're truly useful for what they do. If you want to understand how your skills map to current market demand, you can ask the AI. The LLMs operate on the plane of the ego. That's the professional identity you've constructed, the skills you have developed, and the persona you would present to the world. And Carl Jung had a very specific idea about the ego. The ego is not the whole psyche, it's not the whole self. It's only the part that's conscious, that has a narrative, that can be analyzed and optimized. And AI systems are extraordinarily good at working with that layer. But there's something else that Jung identified. He called it the compensatory function of the unconscious. His idea is this: the unconscious doesn't simply repeat what the conscious mind already knows. It corrects it. So when your ego becomes one-sided, when you're over-identified with a particular professional role, the unconscious begins producing imagery that pushes back. It tries to correct this tendency. That's the precise reason why Jungian dream interpretation for career clarity operates on a fundamentally different register than any analytical tool you can use. Because your unconscious is not working with your resume. Actually, it's working with everything your resume leaves out. Let's get started. Over 8 years of consistent journaling, 3 recurring symbol categories have appeared with enough frequency that I stopped reading them as coincidence. And today I want to walk you through all 3. We're using the November dream from the beginning of the video because this dream contains all the 3 in a single night. The first symbol is the unknown figure, the unknown person who knows the way. In my November dream, there are actually 2 of them. The first one is the village resident who offers to show us the path. And later in the river valley, there's a man who leads the group. Neither of them is someone I know in my waking life. But both of them appear exactly at the moment when the direction is unclear. I have such a person as a recurring figure across years of entries in my journal. And it's not always the same person, but it always carries the same quality, the same characteristic. It's a kind of quiet authority about direction. This person usually appears before significant decisions, not after them. And it consistently is pointing towards something my conscious mind had not seriously considered or had already dismissed. And that's really valuable because it gives additional information that is relevant for the decision. This is what Jung would call a shadow figure. Not shadow in the sense of something dark or threatening, more like in the technical sense. It's a part of the psyche that hasn't been integrated into the conscious personality. This person in my dream knows something my ego doesn't. That's the compensatory function in action. Let me repeat this because I think it's very important. The figure doesn't appear after I made a decision. It appears before. It's there to help me. The unconscious is producing guidance that precedes the analytical process. And that's not something esoteric or mysticism. That's Jung's clinical observation across decades of work. The second symbol category is the abandoned or the locked or the hidden room. In my dream, it appears as the path that should be there but isn't. From the view of the tower, the expected direction is empty. That means that the map that my conscious mind had drawn doesn't match the territory. And then there's the rickshaw, which carries me fast in the wrong direction. And I know it's wrong. I say so. I understand it in the dream. But the driver doesn't stop. He says I have to wait to get out till the next stop. That image actually stayed with me. Because that's exactly what a career trajectory can feel like at 45. You're moving, you're productive, and the vehicle is functioning. But you start to understand that somewhere along the way you stop choosing the direction. Jung understood the locked room and all its equivalents as a classic symbol of the unlived life. The space that exists in the psyche but can't be accessed. The career path you didn't take. The capacity you didn't develop. The version of yourself that gets suppressed in favor of the one that was more practical or more acceptable in your world, in your environment. Now the room or the path, it doesn't disappear just because you stopped going to it. The psyche keeps it, and in dreams it keeps showing you the door. But there's also an uncomfortable part to that. The locked room doesn't appear in the dreams of people who are lost. It appears more consistently in the dreams of people who are succeeding. Senior roles, good compensation, respected in their fields. Their external architecture is solid, so the unconscious keeps showing them the door they're not opening. Because the psyche doesn't measure success the way society does. It measures wholeness. And a career that's optimized for the persona, for the ego, for what the world recognizes and rewards, can be deeply one-sided at the level of the psyche. Now think about it. If you have ever felt a persistent low-level dissatisfaction that you can't fully justify, if everything feels fine objectively, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Because that's not ingratitude. That's your locked room. The third category is performing a completely different activity, with full competence and satisfaction. In my dream, it was kite surfing. Everyone is doing it. I unpack my equipment and I have to kite. I know how to do this. The only thing missing is the board, which another person, an old school friend, has. But he hesitates. But then finally gives it to me. Now the analytical mind, the logical thinking, tends to dismiss this kind of imagery immediately. I'm not a kite surfer, that's not relevant to me. It's just an awkward dream. But Jung would say, look at what the dream is doing. The unconscious isn't suggesting a career change. It's showing you a quality, a mode of engagement, a relationship to work. One that is absent from your current professional life. And notice the details, the specific structure of this image. Because the capacity is already there. The kite is yours. And the missing piece is held by someone else. A person from your past who hesitates before giving it to you. And that's not a random detail. That was my shadow career. It was almost complete, almost perfect. Only one element was still in someone else's hands. And this is what I mean when I say that Jung's approach to dreams and career guidance operate on a completely different plane. Because the unconscious isn't optimizing your existing trajectory. It's showing you what's missing from it. Now, if you want to understand which archetype is operating in your professional persona and which one is suppressed, I've built a career archetype test that maps exactly that. You find a link in the description. The suppressed archetype is often precisely what your dreams are trying to show you. So Jung had a specific concept for what I've been describing. The shadow career. The unlived professional life that the persona rejected. The persona is the mask we constructed for the social world. It's our professional identity. And it's also not false. It's real, but it's only a part of our whole self. It's the version of yourself that was viable, that got reinforced, and that the world responded to. And while we're constructing the persona, we necessarily have to leave other things out. And these other things are stored in our shadow career. I like to call it also the potential self, because we have the capacity to develop it, but we never did it. But it is still there, and that's important, because your psyche doesn't simply let that go. It keeps it alive. And sometimes it comes to the surface in your dreams, in the recurring dissatisfaction, or in the persistent sense that something is missing even when everything looks fine from the outside. So the locked room keeps appearing because the psyche hasn't forgotten what's in it. And my dream example makes it very visible in a way that's hard to argue with. The kite is there. That's the capacity, the readiness, the will. But the board is in someone else's hands. The path forward exists, but not where the conscious mind expected it. The rickshaw is moving, but in the wrong direction, and it won't stop on a simple request. That's not a random collection of images at all. That was my psyche mapping the gap between the professional life I was living and the one I haven't built yet. This is also why the pattern I see across the professionals I work with is so consistent. The ones using AI career tools are getting genuinely useful output. About the persona they've built, about the skills they've developed, and about the market they are operating in. And that's really valuable. But the unconscious is producing additional information. It's producing imagery about the shadow career. I want to make that clear. The AI tool and the dream are not answering the same question. ChatGPT is answering, how do I optimize what I already am? But the dream is answering, what have you refused to become? Now, these are different questions. Most people work on the first one. But for a lot of professionals in their 40s and 50s, the second question is the one that actually matters. What question are you asking yourself? And from which answer would you benefit the most? Now, let's widen the scope here, because I think it's important to be honest about what dream work actually is, and what it's not. Dream work isn't a career tool. It is also not a technique for getting better answers about your professional direction. If you approach it that way, you will miss what it's actually doing. Dream work is an important element of a process that Jung called individuation. And by that he describes the movement toward wholeness. Toward integrating the parts of the psyche that have been split off or suppressed or just left undeveloped. The shadow career is one dimension of that. The unknown figure who knows the way is another. And the locked room or the hidden path is another. Dream work is one way, or it's actually the best way to let the unconscious participate in this process. Because the dreams, which are the symbols, the language of your unconscious, they are the raw material of individuation. Jung was very clear that you have to integrate the unconscious to become whole. And if you think about career clarity, when it comes through this work, it's just a byproduct. It emerges from the process of becoming more whole. It doesn't stay just optimizing a professional strategy. This work matters not because it brings you a better job, but because it changes your relationship to the work. If you're trying to use dream journaling to get a better career answer, you're using a philosophical practice as a productivity technique. You will probably get frustrated when it doesn't produce clean and actionable output. But if you understand, and I hope this video helped you with that, that the unconscious is engaged in something larger, which is the process of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, then the career clarity that emerges has a different quality. It's grounded in something the persona can't manufacture. My dream wasn't telling me which job or which direction to take or which business to start. It was showing me the shape of the gap. It was pointing in a direction I hadn't considered. That's why I appreciate this dream work so much. As I mentioned, I have more than 200 documented dreams. Not all of them are clear or make sense in the first place. Actually, from a logical point of view, they don't make sense at all. But they all show me that my psyche is working on something more. And in this working, in this processing is the value. Let's come back to where we started. Not to dismiss AI tools, but to be precise about what they can do and what they can't. They operate on the plane of the ego. They work with what's conscious, what's documented, what's logical, and what's in the professional identity we build already. And that's absolutely useful. Use them for that. But the question of what your psyche actually knows about where you need to go, that's a different question. And the only source for that is the unconscious itself. Jung's compensatory function means the unconscious is already producing that intelligence. The symbols and images in our dreams aren't random. They're our psyche's attempt to correct the one-sidedness of a conscious mind that has already decided what the options are. I encourage you to use dream work to answer questions the rational mind can't answer. If the question is optimization, skills, positioning, market fit, use AI tools. But if you want to find the right path, the unconscious is the only source. The career archetype test in the description maps which archetype dominates your professional persona and which is suppressed. That suppression is often exactly what your dreams are compensating for. I think that's a great starting point for this kind of work, not a substitute for it. Thanks for watching, I hope this was helpful, and I wish you wonderful dreams.